Myself, indeed, the son was talking on the way up here. She was mentioning or questioning, how long it's going to take, for changes in a major way to take place. And it's already here. Basically, is what we're saying. And it's sort of like, people have been in denial, and people who are in denial are not going to be allowed to remain in denial because all of their economics will be drained.
Yes.
Which means while the European is buying time and has been buying time, he's draining everybody's economics.
Yes.
If you understand.
Yes.
It is no different than the issue that we were talking about earlier, Delilah, with Wells Fargo and their position.
Yes.
And as you already know, remember we talked about actually early last month, and we were talking about Puerto Rico was going to default on May the 2nd. And when they did, that's a cover-up to the world because the United States Corporation Company defaulted. And so the deal is, even with people who have perfected some of the processes or claims with them, still cannot be and will not be and weren't ever intended to be delivered. What they're doing and what we keep doing ignorantly is keep giving them jurisdiction where they have it.
Right.
Because mentally we keep thinking they're the government. They're a private, for-profit, foreign, corporate, leech entity that has been imposturing as government with subordinate franchisee agencies to do what we call their local work. That's really all that's happening. It's all that's ever been happening. When you become conscious and you start creating writs, quo warrantos, reversioners, arguments of jurisdiction, doctrines of discovery, not doctrine of discovery, discovery documents, etc., immediately you see everything starts to shut down with them. When I say shut down with them, they still take an assertive, authoritative position to try to intimidate you, but you recognize that your communication with them stops at that point. And the reason it stops is because there is no platform for it. As a matter of fact, they'll even tell you, let's look at this. Everybody knows that if there's a legal issue, don't you have legal paper? Don't computers have indicators for legal papers?
Yes, they do.
Now, something dealing with law and legal process, isn't it logical that legal paper should be used?
Yes.
Do you notice that they don't use legal paper and they discourage anybody else from using it?
Yes.
Why? Because they're not legal and they're not lawful. It's very simple. What?
They told me they couldn't use that because it was written on legal paper. They was like, no, you have to put it on legal paper. I said, that's legal paper. And they was like, today, I posted, I gave them an affidavit for a quo warranto, and it was on legal paper. And they told me that if I was going to do any legal work, it had to be on legal paper. And I was like, this is legal paper. And no, not this legal paper, the regular standard legal paper. There's no regular standard.
This is standard legal. And then what they're doing, directly lying to you. And their computer says legal. As a matter of fact, say, pull up the computer, I'll show you legal paper. It's like saying, it's raining outside. No, but you got to get the real rain. Everybody's getting wet, right? But it's got to get the real rain. What do they tell you? In other words, once you start dealing with these truths, there is no out. All you're simply doing is pulling the mask off the imposters. The other deal with us is our naivety that we're shedding, and we need to recognize that we're in a process of shedding our naivety. Even though we're intelligent, we're still naive. because we've been groomed from childhood. And keep in mind, intellectually, we know these things. But in the nature of our operations, we're creatures of habit. We still operate as if they're government. We still approach them as if they're government. And as soon as you do, you just, you keep on feeding the beast. This is the reason why you see other nations not accepting the U.S. Federal Reserve note at all, or the Treasury. In other words, they're killing the straw. They're not trying to capture it. They're not trying to collapse it, which I understand, because these are different processes which have been presented, which on the surface appears to be a logical thing to do, to rebut. But the greatest thing you can do is to rebut, not unlike what he's done here. And it has to be consistent, and you have to demonstrate that you know. As long as you demonstrate that you don't know the law, they're going to do what? They're going to operate with you in color of law. And when you're looking for them to operate lawful, it's not that you shouldn't demand it, because you should. But when you expect them to do so, then you're naive. It's like saying, they've been getting away with selling these pit bulls as kittens for years. I'm going down there and talking, tell the pit bull to bark, and they keep on going meow. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like synthetic oil. Synthetic oil can't become natural oil. And it doesn't mean it doesn't give the appearance or it doesn't have some function. But they can never balance out. And when you look for it to do so, you're naive. But it doesn't mean don't make the demand. See, because this is the deal with this. Do not abrogate your rights or your claim of right just because you know that they're not right, or just because you know that they're a fraud. What you must learn to do, and this is real, learn to live within contracts while this thing is falling apart. Meanwhile, do all of your future business, like Drawley says, some of your things you can leave it as it is, work it out, but don't do no new business in their names. And what that is, what he's telling you strategically is learn to live within contracts and learn to refer to that straw, as the estate, the ends legacy. That's how you collapse it. You collapse it by never accepting it as yourself. And whenever you're communicating with them, you always refer to it, not me. Once you understand that, and see, because this is basically what it is. Under the Unum Sanctum policy, the Europeans have essentially declared the Moorish Americans as African Americans and backed the debt for their U.S. corporation company since 1861. Once you understand that, you understand that all institutions under there is backed by Moorish bonds against Moorish. And once you understand what the Pope Francis is saying, you will understand that very clearly. So when you know that all of their franchise structures are based to support that system, it's not support to do opposite. It's sort of like saying, your car has reverse, so therefore you have the option of racing in reverse down the highway. You will have 99% crashes. And once you understand that, not because I say it, but if you use your reasoning, you would understand that any process that they present to you, the so-called capture, it's never going to happen. Not because they don't set a game out. They know that they're buying time. And just like you might dance with them, but dance with them on the point of getting stuff on the record. You don't look for them to act right. It ain't gonna happen. But The major collapsing of the straw is your consciousness. That's what collapses.
Islam.
You know, you choking it. See, every time they try to use it, you choke it. And see, and keep this in mind. The key to the transmitting utility as legacy is that they're bundled and they're made into bonds and they're sold to other countries. Now that the other countries are refusing the UST bonds, the foundation upon all these straws that they've created is the platform is being removed. So they got all this commercial paper that nobody wants. So how much time can that go on? So the real deal is, their doggy paddling in the ocean is only predicated on the people still believing in them. If people stop believing in them, they won't drown.
Right.
Not you capture and find a room in the house. You know, it's sort of like, but I do understand, you know, the passion of us trying to correct things. You know, it's sort of like the warehouse is on fire and everybody says, well, go up in the room in the back. That part ain't burning. Catch it all, baby. So, Dee was mentioning about the Hyundai cars. We were talking about that earlier. Here, Dee.
Which one?
Remember about the ship that was laden behind their cars?
Yes.
And they came into Long Beach?
Yes.
I think what was that last month or a couple weeks ago, not that far. And they turned around, they wouldn't accept the U.S. Treasury bonds over dollars.
Right, they would accept them.
Mm-hmm. And see, and so the deal is, it's only a matter of time that the industry, just like Drawley said, will come to a screeching halt.
Yes.
Because all the bonds are based on us, your theft of your birthright. The fact that people have not been clear and conscious of that fact doesn't change that reality. What has happened, just like any other thing, corruption or even any other season or cycle, it has reached this apex.
Yes.
And there's nothing that they can do to save it.
Nothing.
The deal of this is that people who are caught in the whirlpool of it, because they're in the whirlpool, they keep believing in the system and thinking that, well, what part of the wall, the washing machine do you grab so that you ain't in the whirlpool of the washing machine? The washing machine run, you in the whirlpool. Do you understand? In other words, you have to get out from it. Now this is where they talk about the capture or the collapsing. No, the collapsing is your rebuttal of it,
Yes.
your denying of it.
Yes.
Because remember, the whole principle is based on estate and based on people who have been declared wards of the state, based on them being totally incompetent, having the mentality of minors or listed as minority, and then the corporate operators of the corporate state bond them in everything that they do, whether it's traffic, you know, traveling on the road, whether there's a case, just like we talked about, they create a bond and they float that bond. You know what I mean? Their resistance is because their office only exists is because they're drawing off that bond that they have on the case. Whether you put something in it or not is irrelevant, the existence of it. Because it's all digits, it's all bookkeeping, and it's all based in an estate. And the estate is the claim of the unum sanctum, where the Pope of Rome, you know, through the Bishopric of Rome, have claimed everybody's labor, etc. And this is back to what James Tropicon is talking about, even if he doesn't talk about it in detail like we do. It's still predicated on that principle. You know, let's look at Tropicon's statement and then see what's in there. Then we're going to go back to this reversion, because basically what we're doing is a reversion of a state. Now, keep in mind congressional records, right? Now look at this. Now, is this not what they're talking about now as if it didn't already happen? Aren't they talking about right now all over the place that in April, May, the United States, May the 2nd, the United States Corporation Company went totally bankrupt?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It was already bankrupt.
Yes.
What they've been doing is using their military machine to keep the BS going. Now, remember, this is on the floor of the House of Congress. Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say there's a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. So if they're already bankrupt, isn't that lead to their demise?
Yes.
Well, what they're meaning is if they don't have the machinery in place, the demise is imminent. The demise already exists, meaning that the military operations and the institutions that they have in place that are not being countered is the reason they're in. I mean, they've been out of business, that the people haven't been themselves competent. People haven't stepped forward. It's sort of like the people have been both passive and ignorant, and they're just like laying there like carcasses, and they're just feeding on them, but still they're buying time because the rest of the nations of the earth are not buying their bonds. You see the point? This is not unlike what Seth Rob was saying when he went to Canaan land, and he was coming back and he put 20 notes to get gas, and they told him he didn't want it. And that was in Canada. That was in 2011. So you already know this stuff was already on the outside, is already headed up. We're slow because we're still asleep. You know what I mean? And we're in a process of waking up where the rest of the world is woke. You know, and a lot of the confusion that you see in other nation states is because it has been averaging 50 to 55% of all of their reserve savings have been in the U.S. corporate dollar. This is where why they're having these problems around the world. And so they're merging their efforts to do what? To kill it. So meanwhile, just like there was a U.S. Ship that was in Saudi Arabia, and you know Saudi Arabia has much to do with the construction of the petrodollar with Nixon, etc. in '71. Now keep in mind, so they went to fuel up to go back to the, back to sea, as you call on the ocean, right? They wouldn't take dollars. They told them they want silver bullion. So they were stuck. But they had to make arrangements and to get that oil, to run that tanker, the silver bullion. Now Saudi Arabia is a vassal state of theirs. So you already know if that's happening with them, that's giving you a signal what's taking place around the world. It's only a matter of time. And now with us, things that we've been telling people for the last 30, 35 years, you'll find Europeans saying openly now. And as we were talking, me and Sandy was talking earlier about Anna von Rees, Jim Willey, Fulford, Loren Murray, and others are saying bluntly, even with a lot of law detail and historical detail, things that we've been telling people the last 35 years, that has been considered, left field, not serious, renegade, Moors and all that stuff. And now Europeans are telling you. Because they're being dissolved, Islam. Their whole platform was being dissolved. But let's look at this. Now, it is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March the 9th, 1933. So these circumstances aren't new, are they?
Nope.
Are they?
Not at all.
Oh, and we already know this is not the first time. But the point that I'm making is this. The things that people are starting to hit people right now, the people are only starting to respond because it's a current reality to them, but the stuff has been already established. And what has happened, anybody that's dealing with you is really taking anything from you as a gift, the donors, because you can't pay anything. And this goes with the reversion, this consciousness. Now see here where I have the Emergency Banking Act, March 9th, 1933, 48 Statute 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent, HJR 192, 73rd Congress in session, June 5th, 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. So when you start a reversion of action like this, logically the platform is not designed to receive, but the platform was constructed to abrogate this. The fact that it wasn't admitted to, or that it was what you would call a shadow operation, Islamic brother, that it was a shadow operation is really the issue. You see? And the fact that it's becoming more and more apparent to everybody and anybody that that is the case. But meanwhile, we're still psychologically responding as if they're government, only because they're managing your trust. But the trust is a trust made to appear like you, but it is not you, which you already know. So it's you and not you type thing. So you got to be clear on the fact that you ain't got anything to do with that other than rebut it. Now, if they can get you to try to look for a benefit in it, this is why they're doing the what you call authenticating the birth certificate. Because if you think what that really means, what that does, that relieves them from future world court suit on reparations, because people, whoever does that, is seeking a benefit. Because it's a fraud. So you can authenticate means to authorize, to say this is valid, you know, on the promise of a benefit. And so at that point, you just let them off the hook, which is why they're doing it. Now, again, like I mentioned before, it's according to your level of consciousness. Now, years ago, like say you was a young boy then, like say 35 years ago or so like that, they were doing what you call HLOs. And that was not different from what you call UCCs right now. It's one of the levels of it. Then they were doing white Christian sovereign. Then they were doing state sovereign. Then they were doing UCCs and financial statements. And if you notice that over the years, people have run through all these systems, including Europeans, and then when they perfect them, you only have a handful of people that were able to even exercise little pieces of it, and even then they get blocked.
Yep.
And so now that the people lost faith in all that, now they're doing the authenticating the birth certificate, which is essentially the same thing, different name to do the same stuff. Do you understand? This has been running, what, 50 years? Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Older than many of the people that are trying it. But the deal is, because the system is not designed to liberate. Because the system was designed for the purpose of institutionalizing peonage, forced servitude, slavery. It was designed for that purpose. How can it function other than what it was designed for? So the point that I'm making to you, the different offers or processes that they present to the people are to buy time. Because the only way that they can honor any of it is to do what? To admit their dissolution, which they're not admitting publicly. So when you do that quo warranto, what if they have to bring it up? Not only do they not have one, they never did have one. Because when you talk in quo warranto, what are you saying in law? The floor is open for a minute. When someone issues a quo warranto to a so-called public officer, so-called public employee, so-called politician, essentially, what is a quo warranto?
Saying that they have the authority to act on anything, especially law, a matter of law.
All right, you're correct, but let's be more specific. What's the foundation of it?
Common law.
All right, what's the foundation?
In the republic.
All right, there you go. A quo warranto is a document, public record of election or appointment as a constitutional officer. That's what a quo warranto is. It is the authority documented to act, to do, to exercise the jurisdictional powers of that office, none of which they have. Why? Why?
Coup d'etat happened.
Say again?
The coup d'etat happened.
Yes, exactly correct. So the coup d'etat of 61 was for the purpose of overthrowing the republic. So what institution or agency that would be constructed or franchised under that venue would be designed to oppose that venue? What McDonald's sell washing machines?
None.
No.
No.
And they got some big ones, some small ones, some
No.
in-between ones.
No.
And once you, when I say you were talking plural, use your common sense and understand the history. This is why very often we redundantly go over some of these things, because you can see that people, it doesn't dawn on people that these people aren't government. They say it, and then their mentality doesn't indicate that they get it. You know, and like when you confront them with papers like this, and they'll tell you that legal paper ain't legal paper, and water ain't water. And you say, oh, you denied me my right due process? We don't do that here. Because we don't what? We don't allow due process here.
I'm going to give you an attorney no matter what, whether you want it or not. I'm going to give you an attorney.
Islamic brother.
So when you're saying, who would be the de jure underwriter that would write the quo warranto for, who would be the one that would do that? Would that be the de jure Congress? Or
Now, what we see here with House Joint Resolution 192, what Tropicana is actually talking about is statements that were made and records that were accentuated, that already exist, but that were accentuated by Louis McFadden from 1932 and 1934 in his criticism of the sellout. And what they're talking about is Woodrow Wilson. Now, while they're not mentioning it directly, do you understand? You know that if you know that history, you know what this is all about. But if you don't know the history, you would have a tendency to look at the document current 33 as if this began in 33. Now, keep in mind, the coup d'etat took place in 1861, right?
Yes.
That was the last lawful president, Lincoln, was also the last lawful Congress.
Yeah.
Are any of them living or any of them in the seat?
No.
All right, so then answer your own question.
Okay, well, there's not a de jure Congress.
Once we understand that, we understand why Drawley said, you don't do anything else, declare your nationality. Take your places amongst the affairs of men. If you understand the foundation of government, you understand that the people are the government.
So
Now, one, wait,
Quo Warranto is similar to,
all right, let's make it very simple what a quo warranto is. Like say that you, as an example, have a corporate entity that makes, say, the bags that you have right there, right? And so we want to do business being agents that sell that bag. So how do we show that we're not knocking off, like knockoffs, phonies and stuff like that? We get a license for franchising, just like if you see McDonald's, right? They'll have on the wall a franchise certificate as well as a certificate for doing business in the particular area that they're dealing with. The franchise certificate would be the quo warranto. Any constitutional officer must have a quo warranto because that goes with the JOB.
almost like a declaration of
It's
authority.
essentially a license. That's what it is. That's what a quo warranto is. So what you have is a bunch of people who have been acting as they've been acting with the power of constitutional officers, and they're actually organized criminals. The people have been asleep, and the difficulty is to get it clear in these people's head that these people aren't government. Just because they're all that you've been looking at and operating don't change that. The fact that the world is starting to reject them, it's starting to expose them. It seems new, but it's old. What's new is these people are finally waking up. That's it.
So if they had a warranto,
Which they couldn't have.
that would be what they can have. And
It must be on display, but
unless
because
the false
people,
Congress, unless the false Congress is putting out a false one to them.
exactly, and they won't even do that because it would create more liability. You see the point? This is one of the reasons why, as Brother Guru was talking earlier, why they don't want these documents when you start countering them. Because it's a liability for them. They can get satisfaction corrupting things for the moment, but they're putting on file something that will get them hung later. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And there's no one that's working in any of these so-called government jobs that are not liable.
And so when you call them out with your paperwork,
Exactly.
Now
It
they-
messes up the system
yeah,
because the system is opposite. Once we understand that Ronald McDonald isn't really your cousin, and he wasn't supposed to have the inheritance that he's been using all these years while you've been poor, and then you start trying to rationalize because you're used to Ronald McDonald, it doesn't make him any less a fraud. And it's just hard to get through our head. We're so used to dealing with them, it's hard to get through our head that they're a fraud. Period. Even though intellectually, all the evidence is there. And this is back to, even after discovering the corruption, people still saying, the government, phrases like that. The congressman, the president type thing. And so this is back again, whereas like Pope Francis, as an example. And we're jumping to these different documents to demonstrate the simplicity of this once you understand what's up. Where, as an example, now this is the letter from Pope Francis to Obama, right? let's look at, now remember, this is issued to all members of the domestic police force, U.S. Marshal Service, the Provost Marshal, members of the American Bar Association, and the American Armed Services. These organic American states of the Union, known as the United States of America, major exercising plenary civil powers upon the land, hereby appoint General Carter F. Ham to lead and command the Grand Army of the Republic and its successors under the guidance of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But let's go down. I just want to talk about the Pope's statement on Obama. Now look at this, these two paragraphs right here. This is said with the knowledge of the distinction between the coup d'etat and the legitimate government that had been overthrown, right? No orders, executive or otherwise, issued by Barack H. Obama pretending authority on the land of the American states while operating as President of the United States Corporation, nor as the President of the United States of America minor, are owed any performance by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Ham, or any ordinary. All plainly stated grants of contractual authority evident in the Constitution for the United States of America remain in place subject to good faith performance of the accompanying obligations and treaties. Now, Mr. Obama is the president of a governmental services corporation under contract. This is the Pope. Now, once you understand that, so he's telling you what is, and even Obama, when he made that speech at that dinner that they had, what, that last month or so, like,
Yeah,
that last thing,
yes.
he told the people, he said, what way, you know, the Republic or something like that. He says, Obama out,
Out.
you know, and well, he's telling them that it's over. You know, he was pretty much sending that signals when he went to, you know, Egypt and exposed that the American Constitution comes from Muslim law. And then Michelle goes to the Alhambra, last stronghold of the Moors before the Romanus Pontifex. It's not that signals weren't there. The deal of this is that the fraud is being overturned. It's not being observed, it's being overturned. So meanwhile, they're buying time because anybody that approaches them to correct that, what you're doing is throwing them out of office. In other words, you're throwing the imposters out of office. They're not going to give you a process to help you do that. That's like you coming to here, where can I file this rope? You know, rope that goes around your neck. Not on the left or not on the right. Can you file this? I don't think so. I gotta go to my supervisor. Then the supervisor goes to the supervisor. I mean, because it's really, when you understand it, you know, when you're not naive about this, it doesn't surprise you what they do. It may disappoint you. But they're telling you that they're criminals. You know, it's sort of like, you know, somebody going into the store, you know, the convenience store, and the guy can run the cash register all week. Y'all got word that he actually came in, robbed the place last week, locked the people up in the refrigerator, and he been running the cash register, and you notice that he can't count too well. You know, he said, just wait a minute, how long you been here? And this is pretty much what it is. They've set up the United States Corporation Company, which is what the Pope is telling you. Their corporation is a services corporation. It's serving what? The unum sanctum policies. And then he tells you in the end, what? Here you go. Now, at the very end, and he talks about the ends legacy. These is the transmitting utilities, right? Then he says all those estates and estates, upper and lower case, right? erroneously believed to represent the American states and American state citizens, and which were conveyed by fraud and legal deceit to the United States of America Minor, and more recently to the city-state of the United Nations, are revenued without exception to the geographically defined American states and American state citizens, where they shall remain in perpetuity as assets belonging to the rightful and lawful beneficiaries. So he's the boss of all the corporate entities. So what hoop do you got to jump through to reclaim the estate? I mean, what processes these people will offer you other than to buy time? Now, the Pope owns all the corporate entities, and it's clear that there's a civil war operation going on. What you have is people who are resisting. Meanwhile, the masses are waking up and they're trying to figure out a process to get to something that any dance you make with them is a fraud. Because it's constructed in fraud. The Pope's telling you it's your stuff. That none of the corporate entities have any right or claim. Now, and let's go a little further. Now notice here, we know that the current circumstance is in part the result of criminal acts engaged in 150 years ago. What is he making reference to? 1868, the creation of the straw. You see, which resulted in the commercial enslavement of who? African Americans, who were summarily claimed as chattels backing U.S. government debt in wake of the Civil War. Despite every act of abolition and declaration of prohibition against both peonage and slavery, it has been the policy of the U.S. government to enslave its citizens. So this is why they're telling you what? That letter paper is legal paper to your face. Because they're in human trafficking business. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? To enslave its citizens and to operate as a rogue state among the nations of the world. Instead of freeing African Americans, the sum total result of the Civil War was to vastly expand public sector ownership of slaves, giving rise to the outrageous and improper claims that have been made against the American states and the American state citizens that we are dealing with today. It is uniquely fitting that the Grand Army of the Republic is recalled to settle this circumstance in favor of the people. Attachments: civil orders, Anna Maria Wilhelmina, Hanna Sophia Ritzinger, von Ritzenstein, von Metlow, Burbeck, private attorney in service to His Holiness Pope Francis, documents related. The United States isn't a country, it's a corporation. Hidden Vatican Crown Empire. Now, so if you understand this, you understand what Drew Ali been telling you. Now the Pope is telling you. This is not unlike what you were saying earlier, Sandra.
Yes.
You know, that the European is saying it, you know, now it has meaning to the people, but it's understanding that the European is the Negro God. You know, so they're telling people things that many people call us renegades and everything else for 35, 40 years ago. But, you know, just generally exposing this information, and that as if we were making something up as if it was a belief system. You know, some kind of Islam religious belief, and this is the birthright of the people. And this is back to the concepts of when people really begin to understand the Moorish Divine National Movement set forth by Drew Ali for the restoration of the lost estate. And this is why people like Malcolm and others who wake up and can't be brought up why they murder them, because they become a liability. Because you find out that a lot of your own so-called black leaders are really compromised co-operatives. You know, and you be thinking that they're, you know, great guys of the spiritual God, of the blackness, of the hotepness. You know, really, and people really, you know, get all enamored with them, and the deal is, and this is really what's wrong. And the fact that they won't tell the people, making them think that, you know, just because you collect a lot of information, that therefore, you know, you're liberating yourself, or you call yourself Muslim or Hebrew national, or start using the Bible and making a whole bunch of claims, and then taking on a Muslim name that you jumped out of that jurisdiction when they don't even know the foundation of this bonding against them, which is really what their problem is. What they believe is irrelevant. And this is why anybody that's a scholar doesn't take so-called black leaders serious, because they're not really telling the people the truth about the foundation of what's happening to them. They give them some kind of different versions of so-called religions or churches and make them pacify, make them, you know, admire them. And really they're marking time, they got them on a social treadmill. But this is back to when you're looking at the different nations of the earth dumping those UST bonds, which means for all the instruments that they've created and the derivatives that they created, that is the funding for their machinery, is dead because nobody won't buy it. See, so the deal of it is, and this is again where, as many people have perfected the different systems, you know, promise systems of capturing the straw man, or capturing the birth certificate, authenticating it, or filing UCC1 financial statement, etc. Any instrument they give you to sign makes you a debtor. It doesn't matter, because they're there to rob you. That's why the coup d'etat took place in the first place. It didn't exist, meaning the United States Corporation Company doesn't exist for any other purpose than for human trafficking and to set up the platforms administratively to take care of that business. That's it. So how are you going to bring a liberation instrument to them and they're going to follow it in their record?
Todd.
But
Could I just share this though, because I got this off the internet. It was a real truth call that happened on 5/25. But I was going to share with her group. What it says is that Wells Fargo bank managers had a meeting from 9 a.m. to 1:30, and then they were deployed all over the continental U.S. to the redemption centers. They went over final structured payout instructions, and the meeting started at 9:51 this morning, went to 4:30 p.m. HSBC is included, so what we have is a work around the U.S. government. HSBC and Wells Fargo will be doing the redemptions at all redemption centers. So that was one thing. And then it also says the emergency exchange center security will extend for 7 miles, so that, you know, people will be in line for 7 miles.
So what's it telling you? What is it that they're admitting to that a lot of people may not be catching on to? They're telling you that the Federal Reserve note in a little while is not going to be acceptable, which means if you got it under the mattress, you may as well keep it there. And what you do bring out is going to be devalued.
So it doesn't matter whether you went to the center or not today. Their managers are going to deny it anyway, but they've been deployed already all over the U.S. to these redemption centers, all right?
Now, keep in mind, Title 12, United States Code 95A, Part 2. What does that, anybody read the, Anu?
Read that first paragraph and then do some analysis.
The one at the top or the one?
Yes, one at the top.
To make no claim with respect to the title, name, nom de guerre is the title, and to surrender and assign any and all reversionary interest to the United States subsidiaries for full acquaintance, discharge, settlement, and closure of my reliance, Title 12, USC 95A, Part 2. And I assume no liability and do not consent to stand as a surety for any point, moment in time.
All right. Now, what do you understand there?
They're not taking any blame for anything.
No, be more specific.
All right, let's go down. I'm going to go down to the end, and I want you to read it.
Yeah, better
And then we'll go back. We'll go back.
Now, this is public law, right?
Yes.
Now, that's United States Code, subsection 95A. Go ahead, read it.
Regulations and transactions for foreign exchange of gold and silver, property transfers, vested interest, enforcement, and penalties. Part 2. Current through, I guess that, what is it? Public. Current through
Public
Law 113, 163, see Public Law for current Congress.
All right.
Any payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment, or delivery of property and interest therein or interest therein made to or for the account of the United States or as otherwise directed pursuant to this section or any other rule, regulation, or instruction or direction issued here under shall to the extent thereof be full acquaintance and discharge. Acquaintance and discharge for all purpose of the obligation of the person making the same. And no person shall be held liable in any court for or in respect to anything done or omitted in good faith in connection with the administration of or pursuant of any reliance on this section or any rule, regulation, or direction issued hereunder. Want to go on? Quentin?
No, I put that in so that people understand what a quittance is a written discharge. So what is that law essentially telling you? It's essentially telling you that the debt is to be paid by the United States, not you. It's exactly correct. And they've been converting their obligation to you.
Just like they've been converting the tax.
That's the bond. That's what the quote's talking about. That was by defrauding. So when you're looking at public law and House Joint Resolution 192, this is why they're not spelling out the public law, because they don't want you to find this. So they just give you enumerations, knowing that most people don't do research, and most people get caught up in running around in circles trying to solve these processes by claiming the straw, blasting the straw, authenticating the birth certificate straw, and they keep jumping through all these different hoops, and what it really is, none of them are valid, and that none of them can be valid because the people who introduced them aren't valid. It's like a robbery. It's like a robber telling you, you fill out this form and it'll tell you how to get your watch back and your bicycle back that I stole last year, and also your parents' bicycle that I sold 10 years ago, and also your car that I stole and I've got it on the bond. And so you fill this out, and then you got to go file this, but don't put it on legal paper, and then you come over here and apostille it, and then you go over to the transportation department, and then you go to the Secretary of State, and then you get a apostille, then you go over there and you file those papers there, and then you do a UCC 1, then UCC 9, and the people keep on falling for it. You get the whole point. And the deal of it is this is why you always hear me say to people, if you want to liberate yourself, teach somebody that does not know this, even though they're going to be resistant. They're resistant because they believe in their politicians and leaders, who usually will never tell them this stuff. Do you understand? And so that stops them from accepting reality. This is reality. And so the deal is key. You want to liberate yourself, liberate somebody who doesn't know, and tell them in a way that they can comprehend this and make sure they understand the concepts. This is why if people, anybody amongst our people that are talking about liberating our people in any manner, and don't give them the background of these bonds that are against them, how it happened, who controls it, etc., they're full of crap. This is public record stuff. It's not like, this ain't mystery. You know, and the deal with it is, it's become obvious to many of the nations on the earth that the people here are so compromised that the so-called leaders ain't going to tell the people. The politicians definitely ain't. And so what they're doing is that they're starving the beast by not buying the bonds. This is what this is all about. When you're looking at the BRICS nations, Mint nations, all these things that are taking place now, the ships being turned away, and killing the bonds. Germany, their ally, commanding their gold back, and they dropped them buildings and the gold disappeared type stuff. And then they say that Muslims did it. You know, see, so however we look at things, the real world ain't looking at this thing the way we look at it. They're looking at it for what it really is. And while these people here are asleep, keep jumping through these hoops, the rest of the world's coming like this. And so the deal is, all of the instruments that they created to back their bonds, the nations aren't buying the bonds. And so what's happening, they're having to do what they're calling quantitative easing, which means they're printing day and night fiat currency to cover due bonds and things. And so by default, it makes it devalued. And then countries are not accepting it. Just like, you know, like that U.S. ship that was just in Saudi Arabia, when they tried to oil up to get back onto the seas, they wouldn't take the dollar. They told them silver bullion. So they were stuck. You know, so when you understand this reality, that means so all these straw instruments that they've created to back the bond are being rejected by the world. They're having to absorb them. And that would be like what you call a loop, a return loop. So it's like shooting a bullet out, and it goes, gets near the target, turns around, and comes back at you. It really, economically, it's the same exact thing. If people don't understand how currency, which is not money, how it works, they would understand that. If they don't understand currency, it's hard to make them understand what's really taking place. So the best analogy is they're shooting guns, and the bullets are acting like boomerangs that turn around, come back at them, and now they're busy ducking. So every time they shoot, they actually create a liability for themselves. This is actually what's happening. It's a return loop from an economic position that would be called a return loop. So that means all the instruments that they've been selling around the world are being sent back to them. And so the nations are taking them while they're accepted as prime, and they're buying up all the prime property located here in North America, and they're converting it to gold and silver or some hard asset. And so what's happening is the Europeans are losing power by virtue of the operations, because if they themselves declare the UST bonds as not pristine, then they undermine themselves. And so the nations are using them to buy estates. You have different international nationals who are buying multi-million dollar, you know, that's a misnomer, but they're buying multi-million dollar estates to actually launder and then leaving the estates. And then convert them. And so what's happening is Wells Fargo and all the rest of them, Wells Fargo goes down the tubes because they got most of the derivatives on this fracking. And so the guy who was the head of the fracking thing, where he committed suicide the other day, suggested that probably was helpful. He probably got help. You know, so you gotta, you know, while we may be analyzing different things, you have to understand that they're under constant pressure that we need to be aware of. You know, so this stuff is not going to be maintained for them anyway. You go, brother.
So, if you can explain a little bit about when this all fails because of the inflation that you're talking, the FRN, Federal Reserve note, is going to be inflated so much that it's only going to be worth.
This is why Drew Ali said there's going to come You see a little boy or girl, or even yourself walking down the street, and you'll see a so-called $20 bill on the pavement, you won't even waste your time to bend over to pick it up.
Right. So now when J. Helm, those who are here, once the Europeans start pointing the finger and saying they the citizens, and when they come to them and ask them who are they, and they tell them they're U.S. citizens, that means they're the backing for their peonage or maybe taking.
Exactly. In other words, now if you watch, now punching this in, because Sandy was talking about it earlier, and Dee was talking about it too, with the Europeans who are denouncing their U.S. citizenship. Do you see them running? Now look, we're not talking about some of your lower middle class Europeans. Do you see any of the upper class Europeans talk about filing on UCCs or trying to capture the straw man? You see them denouncing their U.S. citizenship and nationalizing in some other nation state. You don't see them going through all of these processes that are presented to, people who keep thinking that this stuff is legitimate. They know that the only legitimate action is nationalization. They know that that's it, and they know that U.S. citizen is a corporate entity. As you can see, a juristic citizen under the United States corporation entity is dissolved because it's dissolved. And so now, and this is where the Pope's talking about the true American states, organic, and he's saying organic and geographical. Why is he saying geographical and organic? He's talking about the land, therefore the real Americans. Then he comes bluntly and tells you it's the African Americans. Of course, you already know it's Moorish Americans. You know what I mean? So, meaning that if people could even just read, it is so obvious that it's already over. It's just that this is like a big monster, Goliath, and he casts a big shadow. So as he's falling, some people just don't recognize that he's already fallen. It's sort of like this is, and it's sort of like what we were talking about earlier with Sandra. It's it's been the only appearance of the only game in town for so many generations that people don't know another paradigm. And even though the Titanic is sinking, they're holding on to the rail, as if holding on to the rail for stability for something that's sinking, because they can't think in their mind swim or life raft. You know what I'm saying? And really, this is what we have. And so they know that their stuff is not going down, it's down on the outside world. Is that they've been spending their energy and time still deceiving the people here because they don't want revolution in the street. But it already is done. It's already falling. It's just that it's so big, and again, like I said, the only game in town for so many generations, that people's mental have not dawned on them that it's not going to be over, it's over. It's just that the paradigm is that it's been the only game in town. And so the only thing they can do now, which is what they've been trying to do, is war. To cover up. But at the same time, the nations aren't buying the bonds, so they can't fund it anyway. Not only that, the machinery that they've been operating, for the last 30 years is 30 years obsolete compared to Russia and China.
Yes.
Even though, you understand, they're well established in volume. So their only threat is nuclear operations. Just a scorched earth type thing. We'll take the ball home and we ain't gonna play the ball type thing, or bust the backboard type stuff. Because they can't win. And it's sort of like the bully has finally been put in check and no one to admit it. And the people who's been under that check is still sitting on the bleachers, tentative and pausing when they can go home if they want to. They're still scared. He ain't got no power. Because if he moves big, they're going to hit him. It's just that they're used to him exercising his corruption for so many generations, even though intellectually the evidence is there. They're still not convinced. It's so like a little, scared child who's been abused by, some perverted uncle who's been beating them for little petty stuff. And because they're staying in the house because the parents ain't there or something like that, and the child scared to move, and these people are not too much different. We're still responding as if they're government when all evidence shows you they're not only not government, now the world's telling you that they're not government and giving you the evidence. And we're still approaching them like they're going to do something positive. It's not going to happen. Go ahead, Brother Anu.
So what might be the situation that happened when they answer wrong to when some of these are here to assist, but they answer wrong and they deny their birthright, their mothers and fathers, their ancient mothers and fathers' their sanguinity,
Yeah, good.
and they say, oh yes, I'm a U.S. citizen. Do that mean that right then,
That means
they
a U.S. citizen is now a liability.
So what I'm saying to you, well, they might put a bullet right in their head, right at that
It's a possibility. It probably wouldn't happen like that, but understand it would not be a far off thing now. Meaning not unlike what happened to some people that insist on claiming to be somebody they're not, like the so-called Hasidic claim to be Jews, they're not Jews. That while they was trying to hide that they was, because they come up with that and they was stopping them from breathing and stuff with different methods. Meaning, like I said, when you was riding high, you controlled the power and controlled the economy. And that's while everybody recognized it was robbing everybody. Then all of a sudden they was, free rabbit meat. And people got rewards for removing them. They were considered a scourge. And so what you find is anybody that's associated with the United States Corporation Company is now considered a scourge.
Well, what do you do when the situation is not like you can put them somewhere because they are fallen, they don't have the wherewithal to house them or whatever. So it seems to me that the only thing those who are operating on their lower self,
It appears like this.
They would seem to me that their only option to them would be for them to just get rid of them.
Put it like this. It appears, the way things are being directed now, that the camps that they were planning for everyone else is, so like the grave is digging for everybody else. It's not that the institutions who are taking care of this ain't there. It's that they were planning for someone else. So it's sort of like the reservation they planned for Geronimo, instead of taking his arms and throwing him in there, it looks like they're going to throw them in there.
Yes.
Now the Europeans, who really recognize this, is getting out of Dodge early. So look up this. Over 3,000 millionaires, so-called millionaires, in Chicago alone last year left. If that's not a signal, do you hear about them filing some UCCs? And Sonia was just talking earlier with her son.
What about this joint is you don't hear them doing that either.
Yeah. The promise of that, that's another promise. You understand, but the deal is, as soon as people start exercising it, they start jumping up through the merry-go-round type thing. But the deal of this is to recognize that the coup d'etat was set forth in order to institutionalize slavery. Therefore, any institutional franchise that's constructed under there is for the administration of those platforms. It's not designed to administrate the opposite of what it was designed for. Therefore, there's no accompanying structure to accommodate either de jure or what? Allodial instruments. That's why even when you so-called buy or sell with the mark or the number, of that name, etc., that they're always listed as certificates of title. Never title. They don't issue titles at all. So whether it's cars, trucks, vehicles of any type, any big product, it will be a certificate of title. It is not a title. A true title would just simply say allodial title or title. Why does it say certificate of title? Because it's a certificate that states that a title exists. That's what it's saying. They know that most people can't read. You know, and so the title is bonded and put on the stock market under those T-bonds. That's how they've been what? Backing the U.S. corporate debt. And the platforms upon which these things have been operating, the trading windows, not necessarily financial, the trading windows have been what? Neutralized. So it's like you, just like, you know, basically somebody with a pocket full of fiat, you know, go place, you know, give everybody soda. Everybody soda. Get backups and everything. Pay for everybody's hotel. And then that's the only loans people was taking it. But when they start treating you like you walking in there with Monopoly, just came up with Monopoly board, you know, your pockets is bulging, and all of a sudden you ain't demand no more. And actually, not by scenario, that's exactly what's taking place in the trade windows of the world right now. And if we can look at that and understand that our interfacing with them does not avoid that truth in that scenario. Meaning it's only a matter of when, not if, that it dawns on everybody. But what's going to happen to protect themselves, they're going to play the cards to the very last, and then everything's going to collapse. That's what they're trying to do. They're buying time. So what can I, you, or anyone other than put them on notice with writs and affidavits? Other than that, what is you or anyone else going to do with them to get them to act right when their allies in government, you understand, are rejecting them because they won't do right? At what point does it make you and me think that they're going to do right by us? Best thing that we can do is do what? They don't operate in good faith. It's for you to do what? Give up, relinquish all faith in all their institutions. In a simple phrase, it's called render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That's the most simplistic form that it can be put in.
Worship under your own vine and fig tree.
Exactly. Now, in the political venue, that would be called nationalization all over the world. Now, when you was reading Reversioner, now you see why I put the law in there, so that people have a reference. And then when you read it again, you have a different comprehension. I put in there some inserts of definitions, you know, just to help people study. Now, see, so what you're talking about is that very straw that the Pope was talking about, see? And so what you're doing, you're reverting back to them, and like, even when they're talking to you, you can say that you're the trustee, you're the discharger, you're the corporate entity, and that's your construct. That you're alleging to be me. I know it's not me. You know it's not me. But I'm here under threat, duress, and coercion because we know that you are human traffickers. To rebut your position or your claim of entering that Cetus and Sister Q trust. Isn't that what we're talking about? And this is why you're telling me no legal papers. Because you're not legal, which is an admission. Got you on record. You see what I'm saying? So therefore, I revert all, what? The quittance discharge to you, because Because that's what they're agents for the United States Corporation Company. You see? See, so a reversion is the above affirmative statement in concept, which means you don't even have to say it the same way, but if you understand the concept. See, relative content made by a conscious living man or woman or servant may be used in rightful law to rebut an injurious or wrongful assumption made by another, or to revert one's rightful legal position, status, estate, and standing, especially when put into an unconsciously assumed position of obligatory debt. That's what this is about, see? Or subjection, as imposed by persons doing business as a foreign corporate United States or any other foreign person, agent, or agency. A reversioner in law is one who has a reversion of right to receive an estate in reversion. Reversion is derived from the Old Moorish Latin word reversio, derived from reversus. See reverse. Also see revert, which means to go back in action, thought, speech, etc., to return as to a former practice, opinion, state, or subject, or as in law, to go back to a former owner or his heirs. And think of this in the same nature as of restitution, or an action bringing about the return or the giving back of some property, some estate, or in general the giving back to the rightful owner or heir of something that has been lost or taken away, as in the word restore. Now, when you're looking at this, isn't the book telling you that? That all states misrepresented or by fraud and deceit and put into the jurisdiction of the United States are returned or revenued back to the rightful beneficiaries, and even does it in uppercase and small case in order to indicate that it's in reference to the coup d'etat, because you already know the corporate entity person was constructed in 1868 after they closed the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, which they called the Freedmen's Bureau. And then they created the courts, registered in Delaware, right, in this territory, under the jurisdiction of the Delaware Corporation, right there in town, right, and that's their stock. And so the Pope's telling you, so you don't have to figure it out. But once you understand the history, you know, it's easy for anyone to understand what Noble Drawley did and not get caught up in emotional, you know, some emotional perspective, but understand exactly that he's dealing with this. He's dealing with this 2 years ago and set a platform for you to get both information and concept of mind and operations to start countering. That's what the Moorish Divine National Movement is all about. The restoration of your lost estate. But of course, the people would have to, you know, unlearn the goal and then learn the truth about themselves and the history. The law and history goes together, because if one is not aware of what happened, you're not going to be doing anything to counter it. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you know, you'd be unconsciously still, you know, entering yourself into a venue that you should be stepping out from. And this is, if you want to look at it from a perspective, a Kabbalistic perspective, you can understand the phrase, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. You know, and so, if you feed the beast, understand the beast is not there not to devour. The beast is there to devour. You know, you say, well, you know, he's got sharp teeth and everything, but I think he'll let me bite him and then let me use the toothpick and take the little other bone out of his teeth. You know, I mean, and we keep thinking that their system is designed for anything rightful. It's not. You know, period. So even any offer that they have to restore you, if it comes from them, it's invalid. But then you should know that. And this is why we've told people over the years, whenever you're forced to interchange with them, you do affidavits, writs of discovery, affidavits of jurisdiction. You do not do motions. Why? Motions is asking for permission to enter the jurisdiction. This is why even people can be absolutely correct, totally lawfully and legally correct in a legal argument and enter into a court and they will deny the motion. Because this is a request, you're asking them for an answer. It don't have to be valid. So, would you already have reversion? Would you already have reversion? You know, so that argument applies. And not just that, also, would you already know the play field? Yes. Now, keep in mind, now, when we do the Clearfield writ, right, this is a standard instrument for use. Once you understand the principle with the coup d'etat, right, you understand the Clearfield. Read it, brother.
United States Supreme Court Clearfield Trust Company versus United States 318 U.S.363 371, the Clearfield Doctrine. Clearfield Trust Company versus United States 318 U.S. 363. I don't know what that. Government descends to the level of a mere private corporation and takes on the characteristics of a mere private citizen, where private corporate commercial paper, Federal Reserve notes, FRNs, and security checks is concerned for the purpose of suits. Such corporations, individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government.
Now that's Clearfield Doctrine. Does that apply?
Yes.
Absolutely. Is that the nature of your argument?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's the nature of your argument. Simply, you're not necessarily, or you can disagree with them. You're clearing the air of who they really are. That's what this is. So the Clearfield Doctrine is simply a Clearfield Trust Company that understand this, and they weren't taking the hit for that 26-note check that was forged, which the U.S. came after them with. You see? And so what they're saying, literally, is that you're not government. You come off that BS. You're trying to exercise authority if you're government. You may do that to the dummies, but you ain't doing that to us. And on principle, we ain't taking it. That's basically what they're saying. And so the Clearfield Doctrine, this is the general decision of the court, can be used too in any legal argument with them when they're trying to create an obligation on you that actually belongs to them. Go ahead, brother, continue.
Clearfield Trust Company versus United States 318 U.S.363 371 1942. What, quote, the Clearfield Doctrine, unquote, is saying and establishing in the stare decisis law is that when private commercial paper is used by corporate government, then government loses its sovereignty status and becomes no different than any other mere private corporation. As such, the de facto entities once deemed as legitimate, quote, government, unquote, had failed their purpose and then becomes bound by the inferior and common rules and laws that govern private corporations. which means that if they, the government officials, government agencies, contractors, employees, or personnel pretend or intend to demand, to enforce, or to compel an individual to some specific performance based upon it, their now private for profit corporate status or statutes or upon it, their now private corporation rules, then the government, like any other private for profit private corporation, must provably be a holder in due course in a valid, verifiable contract or any or other evidentiary proof of commercial agreements mutually made between the government or agency, and the one individual or natural person, etc., upon whom their compelling rules and demand for specific performance are made, and furthermore, the demanding person alleging to be governed must be willing to enter the physical, manifest, contract or commercial agreements into the evidence even before trying to get to the court to enforce it their private commercial demands called statutes.
Now, go ahead, and what do you recognize there? Statutes apply to corporate entities.
Yes.
And it's no different than someone coming from behind the counter at Sears and telling you you have to tie your sneaks together on Tuesday or you'll be fined. And then start talking about policemen going to issue a warrant on you for not tying your sneaks together. And you accept it as if they're government when they're not. There was the Clearfield case is essentially talking about the coup of 1861 and the Act of Congress 1871 without mentioning it in the case. They don't need to, because it's an established fact. The fact that the masses haven't been aware of it or that their leaders ain't been telling them is the issue, not that it ain't the established fact. And so where you see upper and middle class Europeans with the middle class being dissolved, they're not going through all these, jumping through these hoops. They're nationalizing and trying to move their assets, whatever they have left, off the shores. But everything that they got out there is getting ready to be nullified.
Too little, too late.
Go ahead.
It's too little, too late.
Oh, of course it is. This is why we told, one of the people for the last 7 years about House Joint Resolution 2847. Go ahead, I'll continue further on.
The Clearfield Trust versus United States case is extremely important because it is the 1942 case litigated after the Erie Railroad versus Tompkins, 304 U.S.64 1938.
Now stop right here, because it is that Erie versus Railroad Tompkins case which they had been using to block any common law or constitutional process.
Right.
And this Clearfield case by default took place after that, which neutralizes that whole platform. See, so the whole platform, once they've been denying due process, has been undermined just by them trying to go after that $26 check that was forwarded. Do you see the point?
Yes, sir. You would have to be in your proper person and national to get back beyond that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And see, because all these things that are taking place are essentially forcing the true heirs to be identified, and everybody keeps trying to avoid it. They keep talking about the problems, the violation of the Gold Act, even sometimes saying there ain't money type thing, and talking about the straw. And when it all boils down, if you're not talking about the African Americans, i.e. the Moorish Americans, You understand? The bond ain't yours. Meaning that all these bonds that have been backing the U.S. debt is against the Moorish Empire, designated as African Americans. So can so-called white Christian sovereigns make a claim to be creditor?
No.
No.
This is why you don't see them Europeans doing them UCCs. You see lower middle class people and some of your common people that keep running around with these processes. And the only real energy that exchanges is usually the people that sell the packages. And then as soon as people perfect one form, then they got another process after. Oh, now you got to file this, or now you got to file that. Remember when they first started, you had to do no EIN numbers and stuff like that. Did you?
No.
Mm-hmm. Every time people perfect the process, you understand, then they started another obstacle, another deck of cards. But like I said when I was in North Carolina, and this is for all the people, and it's not dismissing the hard work people do, or the study, or the dedication for the restoration. I'm not criticizing that. I'm just using basic, fundamental commercial business case. All people that have been selling UCC packages in the process for years, it's provable that they've been transacting numerous fiat energies, all people from 500 to 1,500, sometimes a little more with these processes, right? And name 5 people that has been successful. Name 5. And we talk about millions of people who've been following UCCs across this country for years. Name 5 people that's listed that's been successful. The only success you see is the people selling the package. And the corporate state entities that they keep going to get these things apostilled and stamped. And the parking lots that they got, compensate for parking, and they've lost a work running around. Is it not true? They're generating fiat movement and getting no benefit, but is a promise of the benefit. And I understand, the frustrations, etc. But I'm saying that to say this: your liberation will be when the system collapses, not within the system. Go ahead, good brother.
Case in which once legitimate United States Republic legislators and judiciaries was culpably changed from legislating under the public law, which is harmonious and in consonance with the American Constitution. However, and to the contrary, these U.S. officials knowingly became breach of trust operatives and servants for the deviant foreign entities and actors doing their foreign business upon the land, and exercising their foreign powers and activities for the private profit. These officers, holders, secretly began legislating under deceptive public policy, supporting fraud accommodating to, generating profits for, and catering to the desires, the benefit of, and the wishes of the private foreign for-profit creditors of the U.S. Corporation, which is a foreign for-profit private corporation company.
Now, isn't that what the problem?